Hi everyone, my name is Carol, and in case you didn't see the first part, I am an interviewer with Wicked Connections, and we have a second interview with the one and only Risham. So, Risham, for those who didn't see the first part, do you mind quickly introducing yourself again?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Risham. I'm really excited to be here today. I work at Procter and Gamble as a market strategy manager, and I graduated from Schulich School of Business in 2018. So yeah, glad to be here and excited to chat with you all today.
Awesome. So, this second part of the video is not just relevant for those who are choosing to enter business school, but those who are already in it and maybe feeling as though they're not in the right career path. And maybe they want to aspire to a career that their school is often not considered for. So, I want to start at the very beginning and talk about this concept called target school, which is something that I wish I knew about back in high school. So, I want to ask Risham, can we first explain what a target school is?
Yeah. So I think the term target school is essentially referring to any school that is actively being recruited from by, XYZ company. For example, Schulich tends to be a target school for accounting firms. And what that means is that accounting firms like PwC, for example, are actively sending recruiters and hosting events on our campus to actually hire people from our program, and even within their selections that broadly they will kind of consider Schulich actively as opposed to waiting for an application from that school and then considering it.
100%. And depending on the company, this isn't for every company, but some companies are actually very explicit about it. So they'll have a list of their tier one target schools. Like these are the people, they'll actually interview them first sometimes. This is a phenomenon in consulting. And after that, then they go into their tier two, then they go into their tier three. So for some companies, it is very specific. And that can also lead you to feel like, hey, does that mean it's restrictive? If I'm a tier three or tier two, does this mean like I have a low chance of getting into that field? And of course, this is very dependent on the field and the region. So we're focusing here in Canada. But Risham, based on your experience, how restrictive do you feel as though target schools are?
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna be very honest and say that yes, there is gonna be a degree of restrictiveness if you are at a non-target school versus a target school. That being said, I have seen examples, within my organization of people who are from non-target schools and their path may have looked different from mine, but they are there. And I think what you said, Carol, about it is going to depend a lot on the industry and the company, and the roles that you're trying to get hired for in terms of how restrictive their target school process is. Certain fields are way more restrictive and they are very overt about it, and certain are more flexible. I think in my experience, when I was going through the recruiting process in university, um, the vast majority of companies tend to be not as restrictive. There is a certain set which are very restrictive, and when they are, it's pretty obvious. So I guess it can be a barrier for certain fields and certain companies, but that doesn't mean, again, like I said, that it's impossible. It's just that the way that you may find yourself at one of those companies, if you're from a non-target school, will look different.
And let's dive into that, Risham. Like, let's talk about the process of landing yourself there. So, from your experience with marketing sales background, now you're a PG, but I understand you weren't always aiming for marketing sales. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and actually, finding your way to P&G?
Yeah. So I actually started off at Schulich in my first year. I was kind of not really certain about what I would want to do. And as I've kind of mentioned previously in my other video and here as well, Schulich tends to have a lot of presence from accounting firms. And I just had a ton of exposure to them in first year. They were always there. So I was out of a curious mindset. I would just attend their events. I would listen to kind of what the opportunities look like. And I thought to myself, this is a cool opportunity. It's interesting. It's not like I hate accounting. I don't necessarily have a passion for it, but I'm also in first year. So, why not explore this? And I did explore it. I ended up getting an internship with an accounting firm and did it in second year. Um, and it was interesting because they recruit a year in advance, for I think most companies, and that's kind of how it happens. So even before I ended up doing my internship in second year, I did spend the other time in first and second year exploring other options as well. And that's when I kind of started to feel this, uh, natural affinity towards maybe marketing and sales could be something else I'd want to do. But I did the internship, and it was a great first internship in terms of like a corporate internship, getting that experience. I did learn a ton from it, but I did also realize by the end of the summer that maybe it wasn't a great fit for me in terms of what I saw myself doing for kind of my longer term career. So I made the choice at that time to kind of pivot. And I started actively looking into marketing and sales opportunities. And P&G was kind of one of the first companies that kind of came up on my radar. And I started, learning about them. I started talking to students in our program who may have, been at P&G before on an internship program as well. And I learned a lot from that in terms of like what they were looking for in terms of the type of person that they wanted to hire. And I started preparing myself to kind of fit that criteria. Um, I built up those experiences, etc. And then I applied, and I got an interview for an internship program. And I did the internship program interview again through talking to a lot of people about, what does it take to be successful in this interview. And then I was lucky enough, to get the role and did the internship and then ended up back here full time.
Amazing. And so to what I'm hearing is that, it's very easy, like not easy, but it's very common for you to gravitate towards what your school is best at because you're constantly being sold that career. They're coming to campus, they're recruiting you. But for the other careers, such as maybe marketing sales, for Schulich specifically, maybe a little less popular. And it sounds like one of the most critical things you did was you talked to a lot of people. So, for the students who are looking to move into a career that their school isn't targeted for, I'm hearing networking is really important. Is there any other important factors that they should consider, especially when they're making a pivot or going into something that, let's say, maybe they don't have as strong of an alumni base? What can they do?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I do want to caution and say that like at Schulich, we are still a little bit lucky in the sense that yes, accounting is kind of the predominant, area that you're exposed to a lot. That being said, there are to a smaller degree, but companies like P&G, General Mills, not so much Unilever, but like those are the first two examples that are coming to my head right now. They do still come onto campus to a lesser degree, but they do still come onto campus. So I think for me, I was still lucky in the sense that I still got exposure, to them because those companies were still coming onto campus. But you do have to figure out, what they're looking for, what you need to do in terms of being the right candidate for them. I think a bit more, in a self-led way. You have to find those things out a bit more than with something like accounting because there's just so many people who have gone through that process, at Schulich. So you kind of get exposed to that a bit more naturally. So I think for people who are looking to make that pivot to something else, and are trying to maybe do it in a field which isn't as, overtly like available to them. I think the first step is again assessing what is required to be successful as a candidate in that industry. And I spent a lot of time understanding that through talking to people. And I again call it extra, but I made myself like a list and a criteria of okay, here are the things that they're looking for, and here's what my experience so far looks like, and here are the gaps. So like what can I do to fill these gaps so that I can actually be a strong applicant?
Yeah, and I definitely want to add on to that too, Risham. So, like in my field, consulting, it's very, very small at Schulich. Consulting firms do not go to Schulich. At least a couple years ago, they did not go to Schulich. In fact, my company, Accenture, they told us when what they told me when I arrived, like, oh, we always thought Schulich was an accounting school, so we never went
Oh,
to
that's
Schulich. So
amazing. It's
yeah,
good to
so
have that perception.
yeah, and it makes sense, right? Because every company they have human HR reps, and those humans have their own perception of which schools actually have consulting students, and that's what impacts things. So, like, it's not standardized, right? Like, every firm doesn't have to go to every school. They pick and choose where to allocate their time. So, but one thing that's also prevalent in consulting is people from non-target schools arriving, and what all of them have done, every single one of them without fail, they have all networked. And when we talked about the target school, like tier one, tier two, tier three, what's even more powerful than a tiered school is if you have someone in the firm saying, I want to hire Risham. And that person put their, yeah, they put in an official referral, or they talk to the recruitment team and they refer you. And that is what they're looking for, right? Like the tiered target schools is an indication that you're a good candidate. But a stronger indication is a successful consultant or marketing person or salesperson that says, I think this person's a fit. And they will look at your resume. So that is like another way that your resume can get flagged. Even people at tier schools who get referrals, that bumps up their rankings as well. So, we said it before, but we'll say it again. Networking is so critical to it. But one piece, moving away from networking, you mentioned one thing, Risham, which is about looking at gaps and how to fill it. Because I think a lot of people from non target schools in specific fields would mean that they lack opportunities. An example is because Schulich wasn't big in consulting, back when I was in first and second year, we didn't have consulting case competitions. That has changed now as it's grown, but we didn't have those. So I definitely had some gaps. I did marketing case competitions to fill it, but the point is there were gaps. So could you elaborate a little bit on the gaps that you maybe personally faced and how did you overcome them? Or if you do have more general advice, that would be awesome too.
Yeah. So when I think back to, when I was making that assessment for myself, one of the things that came up for me is that I needed to showcase that I had a genuine vested interest in marketing and sales, and not just say that. How do you show that to a company? And that needs to come up through, the activities that you're choosing to participate in. And also your general, I guess, knowledge slash upkeep with that industry. So what I did was I actually started subscribing to a couple of newsletters. There's a really great it's more focused, I guess, on tech slash digital marketing, but Google puts out this newsletter called Think with Google, which is awesome. So I subscribed to that. I started reading that. There's this thing called the MIT Tech Review. Again, it was because I was like also considering tech as kind of like a field within marketing. So I subscribed to those types of newsletters. And I tried to just read up on, what's going on in this industry. I subscribed to a couple of newsletters that were about CPGs, about uh, ad agencies and things like that as well, because again I was kind of broadly casting my net to understand. So that was kind of step one of like, how do I just like keep up with what's happening in this industry, so that if I get to an interview and I'm asked about like, what is an issue that's come up in your personal experience, and what you've been exposed to, that you think is, something that you'd want to discuss or explore. So that was step one. And then from a technical and I guess skill set standpoint, um, I knew that marketing firms in general are looking for understanding how you think and how you solve problems, very broadly speaking. So I did a bunch of case competitions as well that allowed me to demonstrate that skill set, and again, also get exposure to companies that were potentially companies that I would want to be working at. And Carol, I think what you said in terms of, there wasn't a lot of consulting case competitions, for example, at Schulich, I actually actively sought out case competitions outside of my immediate program. And there's a lot of different like Facebook groups. I will try to look them up after this if we want to kind of show them to people. But there are Facebook groups out there that like consolidate case competitions. I think there's literally a website called like casecompetition.com or something, which aggregates case competitions, not just in Canada, but global case competitions as well. So I think if you understand, like I said, that hey, case competitions are important. There are ways to find those opportunities, even if they don't exist at your immediate program or school.
That's amazing. So if I was to sum up, a couple of the important things I heard, the first thing is understanding, when you figure out which field you want to go into, figure out what do you need to get in there and those requirements, and then you can get creative with it. So for example, for me, when I didn't see consulting case competitions, I could have gone outside of my campus. Or maybe another thing is, some behavioral questions like demonstrating, maybe creativity. Maybe I will help, with a school club and try to change things up there. So, think about the skills you need and get creative on how you show it off, because you can find opportunities. You're not limited to your campus for sure. And also, one critical thing is transferable skills. How can you show them that? And that overall builds to what I think Risha mentioned was your overall story. Why are you going for this position? And why do we have confidence that you'll do a good job? So, Risham, I think you had so much great knowledge in this video. We really appreciate it. And for those who feel as though, they want to pivot, they want to network, but they don't know where to start, this is what Wicked Connections is here to do. We help connect you with mentors. So don't be shy and reach out. There's always a way if you look for it. So thank you so much, Risham, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.